Hey guys, welcome back to Built, Broken, and Rebuilt. Today we're going to tackle something that is just super important, right? And we have to have control of this one thing for business, projects, even relationships with other people that are coming into our life. And that's knowing your value. This is something near and dear to my heart, and it's something that I've shared with so many people over the course of my career as an entrepreneur. And it's also one of the things that I had to learn some really hard lessons on in order to make it work. So thanks for tuning back in. Make sure you watch to the end. I've got some great little tips at the end that will help you as you go forward in any negotiation. And as always, if you like what we're doing here, please subscribe, turn on your notifications, and get ready for the next one. All right, let's get busy. So look, we're going to talk today about something that seems deceptively simple, right? Knowing your value. It seems like something everyone would just get. But you'd be surprised how many people walk into negotiation, walk into just a discussion about maybe where you're going in your company or what you want to do. We negotiate all the time. We just don't realize it. So that's why it's so important for you to know your value. You didn't lose that deal because you're not smooth enough. You lost that deal because you didn't understand how to present your value to what it was that you were offering. And so what I want to do is I want to share with you some of my experiences about how I was able to understand how to set my value in those situations before the client does. Because if you don't know who you are, trust me, they are not going to give you the number you want ever. They're not going to give you the position you want ever. They're not going to give you the authority and the leadership role that you probably are capable of ever. You've got to determine your value and you've got to present it to them. You lose because you walk in with no value statement. You have not set the floor on what you are not willing to do for that amount of money or that position or whatever that may be. So it's so important for you to be prepared. You've got to understand this before you even start. Otherwise, all you're going to do is react to what they're saying. You won't be able to lead the negotiation. You won't be able to help dictate where you want it to go, when you want it to go there. That's why I want to talk to you about this today. And I think I've got some great insight to help you out. Okay, so here's the reality, right? The market does not pay you for anything other than outcomes. Let's face it. You either one, make money for someone, two, you save money for someone, three, you reduce risk, or four, you're efficient and you help them save time. You're probably going to fit into one of those buckets doing whatever it is that you do. And that's where your value is going to be derived from. So if you can't connect with someone based on where you see your value and in what bucket that you're sort of the expert in or whatever the case may be, you're not going to be able to have the right role in that negotiation. And so that becomes an ultimate core value that we have to have control of before we walk into any room. Okay, so this is one of my favorite stories to tell. Years and years ago, back in the States, I was a very successful landscaper. And one of the things that I prided myself on was really taking care of my clients, doing a great job, pricing the jobs fairly, and everything else. And I had this awesome opportunity to work in an up-and-coming neighborhood with very large homes. And I already knew that normally, when I take on a new project in one of these areas, I typically get anywhere from 2 to 4 additional projects. Now, maybe not the same scale, but certainly additional work. So I was able to start building in an economy of scales naturally just by getting one home. So getting that one home in a neighborhood was always really, really important to me. So I'm on this project. It's a big project. They've got lots of different things going on, different levels. And I went to that meeting to present the offer. And the first thing they said to me after turning all the way to the last page to see how much this is all going to cost is, "You need to sharpen your pencil." Now, that feels like a death sentence when you're negotiating with someone. It's not. What it is you now have to take a different posture and approach to what you're doing and understanding what your client is actually saying. But before I get to that, let me back up. So of course, at that time, I was still learning my value. I was still trying to understand what it was that I brought to the table. What bucket did I fit in? What question or need was I answering? So I went home that night, and down in my office basement where I often did most of my work, I was sitting there scratching my head, going through the calculations all over again, and trying to figure out where I could reduce the overall cost of the project. And about that time, my wife at that time came into the room and said, "What are you doing?" And so I explained to her that I had this great meeting, everyone was ready to move forward, but I needed to sharpen my pencil. And she asked me some interesting questions. She asked me, "Are you gouging them?" And of course I said, "No, I'm not gouging them. We're priced where we normally are." She goes, "Okay, are you sure that you've got everything covered? Have you built in any extra money because you're not sure about a certain part of the project?" And I said, "No." And she goes, "So why are you trying to reduce the price then? It sounds like they can't afford you." Now, it hadn't occurred to me at that time when I was sitting there because obviously I was sort of emotional about the transaction. I wanted this house. I wanted this project. And you have to be very careful because that's when you can compromise your value. So when she pressed in, she said, "Look, you do great work. You do honest work. And everyone that you have done a project for is always happy when they're done. So if they can't pay you what you know this project is going to cost, you only have two choices. Number one, you cut corners, you do substandard work, and that's not who you are. Or two, they reduce what it is they're asking you to do to match up to their budget. Whoa, like where did that come from? Okay, so I sat back and I thought, you know what? She's right. And she was 100% right. And I'll tell you why. So the next day I go back, I call him up, I set up a meeting, and we sit back down and I hand out the contract all over again. This time I hand out red Sharpies and green Sharpies. And as I opened up that contract, I looked down at one of the largest items. It was about $65,000 of this big project. And I drew a gigantic red line through it. And they said, what are you doing? And I said, well, we need to get under the number I gave you. So we're going to reduce, what we're putting in so that you guys can afford it. And of course, this was a big outdoor kitchen and a gazebo and, a great hangout area, which was actually going to be beautiful for sure. And of course, the wife freaked out. Was
like, wait a second, this is the whole reason we're doing this project.
And, blah, blah, blah. Well, okay. So I put a green star next to it. Outdoor kitchen back in. Then I went to the next biggest item on that, which was the swimming pool. And I drew a big red line through that. And of course, they freaked out again. Now it was a husband's turn.
Well, for not doing the pool, I don't want to do this. We can just come up with a totally different plan and just put grass and rocks back there.
Wow. So I put a green star next to that. Then I went to the actual plantings, trees and shrubs and bushes, all of the things that make a home start to really look like someone's been living there for a while. And they actually wanted more mature plantings, which was going to be even more expensive. So larger galloper trees, things like this. And I drew a big line through that, and it was a big number. And now they were both in unison freaking out. And so I drew a green star next to it. And I said, listen, guys, I can do this all day long. The reality is what I quoted you is what it's going to cost to make your vision and your dream come true. Now, I know you may not like that cost, and that's okay. I'm happy to do less work because I only know how to do good work. And if that's not okay with you, that's fine. And I handed him a piece of paper. I said, those are 3 other landscapers that I know. They do pretty good work, but I'm pretty sure that they can get most of this done in your budget. I can't. The budget I gave you is fair, it's reasonable, and it reflects what the market says it should. And if we do it, we're going to do it right. Otherwise, there's no point. In that moment, I remembered what my wife had said. They can't afford you. And they either choose to afford you or they reflect themselves on what their actual capabilities are and they make a decision. So long story short, I folded up everything. I wished them a good evening. I said, look, let me know. I would love to work here for you guys. I think this would be an amazing project. And just give me a shout. Let me know. Now, part of that is being a little bit fearless, right? You've got to be willing to stand on your principles. You've got to be willing to say, I do know my value and I'm going to stick to it no matter what. So I did. I wasn't gone 5 minutes. I had barely started my truck and started driving down the road when they called me and said, come back. So of course I went back. We signed a contract. I got a deposit and we ended up building an amazing, amazing project. All of that because my wife reminded me of something. You need to know your value. Because if you don't know your value, you're going to compromise everything that could be related to what it is you're trying to achieve. Whether that's this project, whether that's a promotion, whether that's even accepting a new leadership role. But this also applies in the real world in our relationships, right? If we don't know who we are, we don't know what we're about, we don't know what we're okay with, how do we know what to accept from other people that come into our lives? It works all the way around. So look, there's a couple takeaways here, of course, that I want to point back to about the story that I shared with you. And I think the big thing is you have to remember, never discount value. Value has worth, right? You've all heard the old story about the triangle, cheap, fast, and good. You can pick 2, right? And that's pretty much how it works. You can be cheap and fast, but you won't be good. You can be fast and good, but you'll never be cheap, etc. So I think it's really important that we don't cut our price just to stay in the game, because you can get away with that maybe once, maybe even twice. But if that becomes kind of your tactic, your policy, 2 things are going to happen. 1, word's going to get out that all they have to do is just be a little bit tough and you're going to cave in. Not good. 2nd, people are going to start wondering why you gave them such a high price first and then went to a much lower price. Were you trying to take advantage of them? This automatically brings distrust into your relationship. Even if they go forward, I promise you, every draw, everything you spend money on will be a question now, because they won't trust that you were doing it right the first time. And that is a major issue to have to overcome no matter what kind of project you're doing. So quantify it, right? Money gained, money saved, dream achieved. Did we reduce the risk of failing to get what you want out of this? These are the important things that you need to be able to answer. Little boxes that you check in your head as you're going through this whole process. I think it's super important that you set your numbers before you walk in. Know what you're talking about. Set the floor also. Maybe there is a tiny bit of room that you can make an adjustment on something if they're willing to give a little bit. Again, negotiation. Maybe they can't afford all of the concrete. Maybe they can't afford to get you exactly what you want in that salary that you're negotiating for. But maybe they can create a step through process where merit now gets you to that next level and the level after that. But you can ask for it in writing so that you have something to hold them accountable to, right? If the project requires X amount of something and we can't afford it, is there a way that we can build a 80 percentile answer of that particular project and then add the other 20% on later? Those kinds of things. What can we do to plan ahead to lay the groundwork for a phase 2 or phase 3 of a certain project, no matter what the scale is or what we're doing, but get us where we need to be eventually? Maybe they don't have the budget today, but they'll have it in phases over time. Great. Let's build a relationship where we keep coming back again and again and again, because those will be much more meaningful, and you'll never, ever, ever have the value conversation again, because they'll know that you were willing to sacrifice a larger project up front in order to work with them, but you were never willing to sacrifice value. So what we're talking about is removing scope levers, right? We want to make sure we define the value and define that we're not willing to compromise on that value. If we can stick to our guns there, you're going to end up with a successful project. Okay. So the other tool is, like I just said, let's set the scope. What's the scope of work look like? Do we have to do everything in phase 1? If budget is an issue, can we go to a phase 2 or a phase 3 type thing? So understand that you're not going to compromise value. You're not going to compromise what you earn for the effort in that phase, but you are willing to do more phases in smaller tranches to get everything done. So again, we've kept our value high. We've made it worth our time. We're still going to be able to do it right, which is super important. And now we get to move forward on multi-layers with the same client. That is a win, win, win all day, every day. So look, I'm not a big fan of homework, but I think it helps sometimes. I actually keep a journal and I write things down as I go to meetings and everything else, and I circle them and come back to it and things like that. So number one, I think it's important that you write a 1-sentence evaluation about how you see yourself. I think knowing that upfront is going to make a big, big difference in the long run. I think you need to also be conservative about how you quantify value. Look, I'm guilty of it. You might be guilty of it at times. Sometimes we get busy drinking our own Kool-Aid and it doesn't necessarily come across the way we want it to, because we think much, much higher of ourselves than we probably are. And that's okay. Sometimes that's important, because it builds confidence. It helps you get through certain challenges because you do know what you're talking about. You are that subject matter expert, if you will. But it's also important to recognize that sometimes we can inflate that just on our own. And we're all subject to our own egos, right? Let's be honest. Remember, set the floor where you're not going to go, create a target, and then what do we stretch for? We might have a target, but it would be awesome, or it would be better if we did these two things together for this reason. So it becomes very important that you understand how to frame the stretch, right? And we can cover that down the road, or you can send me some messages and I'll give you some pointers on how to cover the stretch. But nevertheless, understand the floor, the basement, where you're not going to go past, right? This is the cutoff, period, end of story. The target. Here's how we get what you've asked me to do done 100%. And then the stretch. What could we possibly do to get the majority of our target accomplished? Again, 80, 85, maybe 90% of our target, but knowing that going beyond that is going to take us too far. So stretch, but not break. If you can do that, you are now going to stop your clients from dictating your value. You're now going to stop the person you're negotiating with from dictating your value. I can't tell you how important this part really, really is. When you know what your worth is, you have almost no reason to compromise unnecessarily. Now, we do that sometimes to compromise to get into a relationship. Maybe there's certain things we're trying to figure out. That relationship could be personal. It could be business related. There's lots of different ways to look at it. But we have to always know where home is. Home is where that we know our value truly is. So listen, thank you so much for tuning in. And it really gives me a lot of hope that we get to share these kinds of discussions with each other. And I look forward to hearing your comments. You can say anything you want. I answer everything. If you've got questions about, life, world, business, negotiations, what we talked about before about, knowing whether or not you want to become an entrepreneur or not, it's not for the weak-hearted. Let me just tell you up front. But nevertheless, I love being able to share this stuff with you guys, and I look forward to hearing more. Remember, negotiating is not about taking advantage of the person you're negotiating with. There's an old saying, if you walk out of a negotiation and both parties are happy, nobody did their job right. So at some point, there's going to be someone that maybe is a little bit disappointed. They wanted to get a better deal. Maybe you wanted to get a better deal. Maybe you wanted the project to be larger than it's going to be now. Whatever that thing is, if you both walked out of there 100% happy, there's probably something wrong. But if one party is okay, the other party is maybe slightly disappointed, you probably hit it right on the head. Thank you very much, guys. I look forward to it. This is just another episode in Built, Broken, and Rebuilt, and we'll see you soon.